So you're thinking about going bioactive for your ball python, but what plants do you even use in an enclosure like that? Today, I'm going to prune that enclosure and probably pull a plant or two out even because it's getting a little overgrown. We're going to talk about what exactly is in there that's doing really well and some of the plants that maybe haven't done as well for me. So join me. I'm Bob Bledsoe, and behind the camera, as always, is my brother Kent, who won't come near a snake, but wants to be the marketing department for Green Room Pythons. I know what I'm doing. I've had companies before. You've had a company. Tell us about your company, Kent. Plant industry. I had a business where I sold succulents. And how did you come up with a name for it? The word succulent has too many syllables, so it was my idea to shorten it. So what did you call your company? Sucks for You. And how did it do? Not great. Yeah. So this is the inspector, by the way. The inspector lives in that bioactive enclosure back there. Today we're going to go through that thing and prune it. I'm going to pull a plant out, maybe two. It's getting a little overgrown, and as much as I want him to have a ton of hiding spots, I also want him to have some room to slither about. So we're going to pull at least one plant out of there. We're going to talk about what all those plants are. They're all doing well. All the plants that are in there, pretty much, maybe except for one, is doing really well. So they're ones that I would recommend for your bioactive enclosure. We're also going to talk about some plants that didn't do as well. So I'm going to put him back in the enclosure and let him get down into his hide so that he can sort of relax, and we'll get to work.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with this angle. What if it comes crashing through the glass?
Kent, it doesn't matter. Just do it from the corner over here. Okay, you guys, so here we are. Essentially, I'm working from here over, so let's just move. I'd like to be included in this. Just so you know, I have two, before I move it, I've got a fake plant right here. Oh, fake succulents. I could tell they were fake. And one right here. And the reason is, I explained this in another video on this enclosure. I made a mistake in putting pots right here. They're just it's too hot. I've got a CHE up here that keeps the side of the enclosure between 85 and 90, and I have a heat pad underground where the inspector is right now, and it's too hot for anything to grow. So I still haven't figured out what to do with that. I don't think I bought these for like $2 at Michael's, and I don't like them there. Obviously, not obviously, most of these plants are doing pretty well. And the reason that we're going in here is to cut back some of the growth and to remove, I still haven't decided. I'm going to decide on the spot, I guess. I have two, these are both Croton Plants. I think that's what they're called, Croton Plants. And I'm going to remove one of them, and I haven't decided which one. They're very different. This one obviously is closer to the ground. This one grows tall. I don't know. We'll see. But let's go from left to right. First of all, let's talk about this one that's off camera real quick. This is one that's not doing well, and it's because of where it's at. I think this is just a ponytail plant. I've had it there for several months, and then yeah, it's just up too high, and it needs to be moved. If I'm going to keep it in here, it just needs to be moved. So that I'll figure out what to do with. Then we have a Pothos here. Pothos is one of the first plants that you're going to see in any list of plants that are good for snakes or plants that are good for vivariums or whatever. They're great. You can't kill them. They do really well. The problem here is that I've ended up moving these plants a few times, and now they're all just kind of bunched together, and they're growing bigger, and they're just going to choke each other out. So I've got to figure out what to do here. And then we have this Dracana right here, which is also doing really well. I just found this randomly at Petco. They were selling these little plants in containers. I'm trying to get this Pothos. Obviously, Pothos is a vine, and it's just going to creep along wherever it wants to go. But this Dracana, I think I want to keep in here. I think I just want to cut it back maybe a little bit. You know what? I might just cut the top off this because there's another shoot right here that's going nicely. I think I'm just going to cut the top off this, and I'm guessing that I can repot this. I like to use these as starter plants. I've done it with Swiss cheese vine. That's actually doing really well in a pot, and also really well over here. It's kind of back here. You can't see it right now, but it's doing well. So anyway, we'll see if I can propagate that. I don't know if I can or not. I don't know. I'm not really a plant guy. I just learn as I go. So, all right, so I chopped that guy off. That doesn't look fantastic, but whatever. The idea here is to give the snake a little bit more space. And I mean, I guess chopping the top off of that didn't give him much more belly space, but it will eventually. Let's cut this one back right now. This is a mother-in-law plant, also known as a snake plant. This particular mother-in-law plant is a golden honey, I believe is what it's called. And I just pulled that off because this leaf is destroyed. And the cool thing about mother-in-law plants or snake plants is that they are super strong. Most people have felt these leaves. They're really strong. And this used to be sitting over here on this side, and the inspector would just crawl over the top, and he would just kind of lay along the leaves, and they would just kind of support him. And as he got bigger, I went, he's just going to kill these plants. So they do fine over here. He doesn't really crawl over the top of them over here, but I do want to thin them out a little bit. And we've got some that, like, this leaf is not doing well, so I'm just going to cut it. And what you do is you just cut them to thin these. You just cut them near the soil. That actually, God, is that its own plant? I have like 3 of these. I don't want to cut the last leaf of unless I see a pup starting. So I have 3 of these plants in here, and they will start their own pups, and just keep going. I think, gosh. Oh, you know what? This big one. I'll cut away. The nice thing about these, they get pretty big, but they're also really slow growing. So you can, as they propagate themselves, you can cut off the bigger leaves and let it keep going. But it grows really slowly. So this potentially, I think these can get several feet in height, but it would take a long time, and eventually you just pull it out, But for now, it's doing great. All right, let me make a decision on these. Here's my thought on this. This one is sort of too close to the where the glass is, and it's just going to get bigger. But he does like to crawl sort of under it. You know what? I'm not worried about it because I'll cut the leaf if I need to. I can cut this leaf. He likes, this is kind of good cover for him, whereas this just looks cool for me to look into the enclosure. It looks cool, but I'm going to pull it because it's going to give him more space to crawl. Man, and it's deep in there. I've got about 6 inches of substrate in here. I'm going to have to do this with my hands, not the trowel. Oh my gosh. I'm feeling such a complicated root system down here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull this very well. And I don't know which roots I'm dealing with here. Do you hear that? I hear it. It's unfortunate. I think I'm just going to put this in a pot, and I think it's going to be fine. By the way, you probably figured this already, but the lights, these bright lights here, are grow lights for the plants. They're not heat lamps. And the inspector does just fine with them. I know that there is a belief. I believe it's a misguided belief that ball pythons have an aversion to light. But the thing about that is that they are nocturnal, but they also are crepuscular, and there are plenty of studies that talk about finding, especially males and juveniles, out during the day, and females also, especially if they're basking during the day, they're taking care of eggs. The females will come out in the middle of the day and warm up, and then go back to their eggs. So they do come out. They're not like cave dwellers that never see the light. They do come out during the day, They just are more active at night and most active at dusk and dawn. So they're not, it's not like their eyes are super sensitive to light. I do think that having a, and really, I don't have enough information on the red light situation. I know a lot of people say that red light is bad for them. I don't know. I can't say anything about that. I will say though that I'm pretty sure that having a light on 24 hours would be a problem. These are on a 12-hour timer, and he comes out and cruises around, doesn't seem to be bothered by the lights. So I think that, if I wanted to, I'm not going to do it right now, but if I wanted to, I could move this plant further back. But what this just did is it opened up this whole space. He's going to come out tonight and explore. Full disclosure, this is the next day, by the way. I did my intro yesterday, and then I fed him last night. So he's in his hide over here. He's always curious about what I'm doing, so he's probably popping his nose. Oh yeah, there he is right there. He's popping his head out, checking things out. In fact, let me just lift this up so you can see what's going on there. That is, there's the exposed hide. So that is usually up a little bit higher, but it's basically just a medium hide that he stays under. It's usually propped up a little bit higher than that, and then I have this cork bark that's stacked on there for him. And then he's got his entryway, so you can't see that plastic hide. If you're looking at it, it's not an eyesore, but it works really well for him. And he is sitting right at 90 degrees there, digesting his meal and watching me as he does anytime I'm in here messing around. So all right, let's talk about more plants. Here's one that I just remembered was here. There was so much overgrowth that I forgot that I had put this vine in here, and this vine is a Hoya, and I put it in here a long time ago. It's one of the first plants that I put in here, and then I just sort of forgot about it. Here's what looks like new growth. It might be that this was so covered that it wasn't getting any light, and it doesn't look like it's dying or anything. It's just not growing. So I'm gonna leave it, and now that it's gonna have some light, we'll see what it does. Next to the Hoya right here is a Swiss cheese vine. It's planted underneath. I call this the dragon because it's sort of a dragon head. This eye I had to fill in so that the inspector wouldn't go in here, but this is his mouth, his eye, whatever. Anyway, the Swiss cheese vine is planted sort of underneath it, and it's growing nicely, and it's creeping up and coming up here, up and around. So it's doing great. Here's something that does not do well, and I think I just don't know how to do it right, is moss. That moss is still vaguely alive. And I'm going to keep it there just in case. I've put a ton of moss. There's moss covering this pot that also doesn't work very well. And it's just, I put moss all over, and it seemed like a really cool idea, but it's just, I don't know moss very well. I don't know if it's too much. It's probably too much light is what it is my guess, but I don't know for sure. If anybody knows moss or wants to give me tips on these plants, please put them in the comment section below. Over here is creeping fig, which is really great. Does awesome. This stuff will go all over the place, and that's the idea. The inspector tends to crawl around up here, and he always knocks it down. But this creeping fig, I would like to have it creep up this way. And I've got an air plant there. Air plants, I had bromeliads in here too. The bromeliads seem to do well. I pulled them out because they were just too big. I think they were the wrong ones. So I pulled them out, and I just haven't replaced them. But bromeliads do well. So let's talk about the ones that do well really quick. Bromeliads, Pothos, Dracana, any kind of mother-in-law plant or snake plant. I would say any of these vines, Swiss cheese vine, Hoya, definitely creeping fig, all do really well. Oh, this looks terrible. You know what? I'm just going to cut this whole stalk because what happens, I put a lot of plants in here because I didn't know what was going to work and what would and wouldn't work. And I've put some plants in here and taken some out, and some have died and some have done well. And the ones that have done well, plants grow, and it's hard to find plants that only grow sort of teacup size. There are such plants, but you end up with stuff. Oh, shoot, I cut that. I didn't mean to. so this is fine. I've got enough Dracaena right here. You end up with plants that do really well, but they tend to get big, so you got to cut them back. So I talked about in my other, my first video on this enclosure, I talked about the fact that you've got to figure out the pathways that the snake takes through the vivarium. And his main pathway, if he's not coming up here, which he often does, he likes to come up and down around that way. But if he's coming along the front, he comes as far to the front as possible, and he's got this little trail. He goes under this plant and into his cold side hide, which is right here, and his warm side over there. And these hides are just, he's got a regular hide there. This one is right now, because I haven't figured out a better way to do it, I just have this piece of corkwood that kind of conceals him, but he hides back there. And also, I've got a spider web right there that I'm leaving. I've never seen the spider, but I'm assuming the spider's there somewhere, and that's really helpful because there are little flying critters that happen in your bioactive enclosure. It's just a thing that happens. So here's part of this Swiss cheese vine that so obviously he must have come this way at some point, pulled some Swiss cheese vine with him, and now it's sort of stuck in the back. So I'm going to pull that out. This is the kind of stuff that I often do each morning. I'll check and see what damage he's done to the place in the morning. See, that's a pretty substantial vine that a couple of the leaves don't look great in it, but I'm going to put that over here and see what it does for now. But anyway, I'll come in and just see what damage he's done and fix it. I'm happy with this for right now. I'm probably going to fiddle with it a little bit more as we go, but I've thinned it out. I've given him a little bit more space, and at least it helps me that I can sort of see into the back now, at least a little bit better, and see what's going on with this. All right, after watering the enclosure, I did a little additional trimming here and there and cleaning stuff up. I don't know if you can tell the difference or not. There's still a lot of plant in there, but it's made a lot more room for the inspector to crawl around. So let's talk about other plants that aren't in that enclosure right now that either do well or don't do well. Let's start with bird's nest fern. Does really well in a vivarium. I pulled it because it was getting big and I just had too many plants in there and I thought it would look good in this pot. So it ended up being one of my many potted plants. This plant has become one of my favorites. This is a Paradromonia. It's a vining gesnerad plant. And I don't know how common it is. I don't think it's super common, but the reason it didn't do well in the vivarium is it's got these little fragile furry leaves, but it's cool and I can't wait for it to get bigger. I may put it back in there or I may just let it vine out of the pot. Here's one that I don't even have a copy of because it just died. It was a begonia Richardsoniana, some sort of begonia, but it was more like a bonsai tree. Hold on, I'm gonna tell you what it is. Begonia Richardsoniana, Begonia Richardsoniana, maybe. Anyway, bonsai tree type thing with a big thick trunk, and I thought, oh, this will be perfect because it's got a big thick trunk, it'll be fine. But it didn't. What I got was a seedling, hatchling, a little tiny plant with just some sprouts. And it was way too fragile and died almost immediately, which was such a bummer because those are really cool. And I would say most baby little tiny plants are not going to do well in a ball python's enclosure. This right here is a Celegenella plant, and a lot of people call it Celegenella moss, but it's not a moss. I think it's pretty hardy. It's one of those plants that sort of wilts and then comes back and then wilts and comes back, and it's kind of right in the middle of coming back right now. But I think it didn't do well because it was right under the heat. And once this comes back and really starts flourishing, I might try to put it back in there because it's a nice little ground cover, I think. Here's one that the jury's still out on. This is a lance leaf plant, and I just fairly recently pulled it. And it was doing okay, but the reason I pulled it was because I had it planted in this very side plant. You see where that seed pod sort of is, that round thing? I had it planted right there, and I think that's a decent spot for a plant, but this is going to be too big for it. That's just a 3-inch little potter, and this is going to be too big, and I really like it. I think it's really cool. So, but leaves are pretty hardy. So I'd like to get this growing a little bit more and then see if, here's some wilted leaves right here. See if it'll do well in there. It also depends on what kind of room I end up having. You know, if those plants all do well and keep flourishing, I'm not going to have much room to try other plants. But I think the lance leaf plant is probably good for a vivarium because it's pretty hardy. That was a mini lance leaf, by the way, which I think is different than a regular lance leaf. That one is called a Photonia, that little mini lance leaf. This is a zebra plant. I'm sure it would do great in a vivarium. I have not tried it yet because my sister just gave this to me, and it's too big for the vivarium. So I'm going to leave it in this pot, but maybe at some point I'll take a cutting of it and try it in the vivarium. But I mean, look at the stalk on that thing. I think it's definitely hardy enough for a ball python enclosure. By the way, here's the potted cutting of that Dracaena that I took off the top of that thing. All I did was stick the stalk into some moist organic soil, and I don't know if it's going to do well like that or not. I have propagated plants that way successfully, but it depends on the type of plant. I have a feeling that these are really hardy, and I think it'll work. But, you know, if you really were trying to propagate, I don't need another potted plant, but I'm going to try this. But if you were really trying to propagate these, you would probably use growth hormone, and you'd probably wrap it in a wet paper towel for a while or something like that. Maybe put it in a jar of water, something like that. I'm sure there's information online about how to properly propagate these. But I have a feeling this might work, just letting it be in this soil. Here's the Croton plant, potted. It's super tall and crooked right now. We'll see how it does in the window if it straightens up, and I might cut it in half, maybe. At this point, I'm going to leave it as is and let it settle in the pot. This is a benefit, I guess some people would think, to the shotgun technique, which is what I did. I just got a whole bunch of plants and threw them all in, and you see what works. And as a result, I ended up with a lot more really cool potted plants in my house. I have too many at this point, but it's okay. I like having live plants in my house. And this one's pretty cool, I think. It keeps leaking water all over my sweater. So I hope that gives people some ideas of plants. There have been lately a number of posts on the Facebook groups of people wanting to do bioactive and asking what kind of plants to use. And even though this wasn't a exhaustive how-to, I just wanted to give some ideas of plants that work. One of the really important things to look into is what is safe for snakes and what is not safe for snakes. Just type in the name of the plant and then put safe for snakes or safe for reptiles. And there are lists of plants that are safe to use or not safe to use. All of these plants that I've talked about are safe to use because I've checked them all out. Also, I processed all of my plants with a bleach solution, whether I bought them organic or not. I pulled them out of the dirt, the soil that they were in, and soaked them in a bleach solution, which worked for all of my plants. Everybody's really concerned about, oh, that's going to kill your plants if you do that, but it didn't kill one of my plants. It works really well. I'm not going to tell you exactly how to do it. That's a video in itself, but Tanner at Serpa Designs has a video. So if you go on to Serpa Designs, which you should be looking at anyway, if you're looking into bioactive, that's where you're going to get a ton of information. What I tried to do with this video and my last one on the bioactive is touch on information that's not readily out there. But Tanner at Serpa Designs has great info on terrariums, vivariums, design, how it works, everything. And he has a video that talks about how to process plants to get rid of all the pesticides and the nasty stuff that's on them that's really bad for your snakes. So look into that. Kent, do you have any questions? I don't have a question, but I do have some extra succulents left over from my old business. So if you want any succulents in your vivarium, just go to sucksforyou.com and click on Kent Sucks. Kent, number one, succulents are not a good choice for vivarium. And number two, your Sucks For You website is down. So I don't know how they're gonna... Kent Sucks. Kent's. That's a problem, actually. Yeah, I see that now. Why don't you just be the marketing guy and do a sign off? Tell them to like and subscribe and whatever. And do me a favor, don't do it really aggressive. I don't want any swearing. I don't want any aggressive smashing this and that. Just do a nice, sign off. Fine, you don't want any energy in it? Great.
Like and subscribe, and click the subscribe button and like, and you can make a comment on the features.
How do you like that? Thanks, Kent. Hey folks, thanks for watching. See you next time. Quick Green Room Pythons update. Stickers came in.